September 17th, 1939. Imagine this. You're a Polish soldier. For 16 brutal days, you've been fighting for your life. For your country, against the crushing weight of the German war machine. Rolling in from the west, your army is shattered. Retreating, but not broken. You're pulling back, trying to form a new line of defense to hold on. To survive, there's still a glimmer of hope. But then as you turn to the east, to the border you thought was safe, you see something impossible. Something that turns your blood to ice. Kanks not with German crosses. But with red stars, it's a second wave. A red storm sweeping in from the one direction you never expected. This was the moment Poland's heart was truly broken. It was the day the Soviet Union, Hitler's secret partner, stabbed a nation in the back. This attack didn't just seal Poland's fate. It redrew the map of Europe and plunged the continent into a new kind of darkness. But the seeds of this betrayal were sown weeks earlier. Let's go back to August 23rd, 1939. In the dead of night in Moscow, two men representing the world's most bitter ideological enemies, Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union, signed a document. On the surface, it was a simple non-aggression pact, a promise not to fight each other. But hidden within its pages was a secret protocol, a devil's bargain. The secret clause was a death warrant. For Eastern Europe, Germany would get Western Poland. The Soviet Union would claim Eastern Poland. The Baltic states and parts of Romania, two dictators, Hitler and Stalin, shaking hands like butchers, dividing their prey. Poland, completely unaware, had been sold out in a single night on September 1st. The first half of that monstrous plan was set in motion. Germany invaded, the Polish Air Force was decimated. Within hours, the Southern Front collapsed. Under the German breakthrough, Warsaw was bombed relentlessly. Hundreds of thousands of Polish troops were encircled and destroyed, but Poland refused to surrender. The strategy was to fall back, to retreat eastward toward the Vistula River, to form a new defensive line. Their last desperate hope was to withdraw south, into allied Romania, regroup and continue the fight from abroad. But that hope was about to be obliterated. Fast forward to September 16th, the day before the storm. Along Poland's vast eastern border, an eerie calm prevailed. No gunfire, no tanks. No sign of imminent invasion. Polish commanders, desperate for any good news, clung to the belief that Moscow would remain neutral. They couldn't have been more wrong. That very night, concealed in bases from Belarus to Ukraine, a colossal Soviet force was poised to strike. We're talking about nearly 800,000 soldiers, 4,000 tanks, 9,000 artillery pieces, and over 3,000 aircraft. An army of staggering size waiting for Stalin's signal. At 6 a.m. on September 17th, that signal came without a declaration of war, without any diplomatic warning. The Eastern Front exploded. Thousands of Soviet guns opened fire in unison. BT-2, 7 and T-26 tanks, fast and numerous, thundered across the border. Soviet planes swarmed the skies. bombing towns and strafing columns of refugees. A Polish officer stationed near Brest-Litovsk later wrote about that moment of disbelief. We turned toward the east and could believe our eyes. Tanks with red stars were advancing. We were being attacked by our supposed ally. In that instant, every soldier, every citizen knew the horrifying truth. They were trapped, crushed between two giants. Their nation had nowhere left to run. As the invasion began, the Kremlin released a statement to the world, a masterpiece of cynical propaganda. It claimed that the Polish state had collapsed and its government had ceased to exist, and that the Soviet Union was merely stepping in to protect its Belarusian and Ukrainian brothers. It was a complete and utter lie. Poland had not collapsed. Its government was still functioning. Its army was still fighting. But for Stalin, the truth was irrelevant. He just needed a plausible excuse for a land grab. He had planned months in advance. Think about the timing. Why September 17th? It was a calculated predatory move. By then, Poland was already exhausted from fighting Germany. For over 2 weeks, the bulk of its remaining forces were retreating eastward right into the path of the Soviet advance. This left the eastern border, defended by only a handful of troops. For Stalin, it was the perfect moment to seize half a country with minimal resistance. Within the first 24 hours, hundreds of towns fell to a few Polish border units, often just a few hundred men strong, were simply no match for entire Soviet tank divisions. A Polish commander in a message filled with despair reported, "We are stabbed from behind. No one can survive between these two giants." But even in the face of this impossible situation, the Poles fought back with heroic desperation. In the city of Grodno, soldiers and civilians fought for 2 days against overwhelming Soviet armor. They used rifles, machine guns, and Molotov cocktails. Witnesses reported seeing children, some as young as 12, hurling fire bombs from windows at the invading tanks. And the city found itself besieged by the Germans from the west and the Soviets from the east. Yet it held out for 10 agonizing days. But these acts of incredible bravery were futile. The Red Army was too large, too fast, and too overwhelming. The outcome was never in doubt. As the Red Army pushed deeper, Poland's leadership made a desperate run for the border, trying to escape into Romania to establish a government in exile. But this became another tool for Soviet propaganda. On September 18th, as the Polish government crossed the border, Moscow immediately announced to the world, "The Polish government has fled. Therefore, the Soviet Union must intervene to restore order." It was a shameless twisting of the facts, but it worked. It created just enough confusion in the international community to paralyze any potential response. Then came a moment that would be forever, seared into Poland's national memory as the ultimate symbol of betrayal. On September 22nd, 1939, in the city of Breslowska, city the Poles had just defended, German and Soviet officers met. They held a joint victory parade, Photographs from that day showed German and Soviet commanders smiling, shaking hands, and formally handing over the city, as if it were a piece of property to thieves, celebrating their crime in broad daylight. For Poland, the Soviet invasion wasn't just a military defeat. It was the beginning of a new and darker chapter of suffering. The numbers are staggering. Around 250,000 Polish soldiers were taken prisoner over the next 2 years. More than 2 million Polish civilians were deported to the gulags. In Siberia, many perishing in the harsh conditions. The Soviets systematically targeted Poland's intellectual and military elite, a policy designed to decapitate the nation. This culminated in the horrific Katyn massacre of 1940, where the NKVD, Stalin's secret police, executed over 22,000 Polish officers, professors, and leaders in cold blood. The invasion on September 17th was the final nail in the coffin. For the Second Polish Republic, a nation was literally wiped off the map, not to reappear until 1945, and even then under the shadow of Soviet domination. It was the day two ruthless dictatorships joined hands to carve up a country, proving a brutal truth of history. In the cold calculus of power politics, the weak often pay the ultimate price. Caught between German gunfire from the west and Soviet tanks from the east, Poland stood utterly alone, swallowed by the darkness of two empires. One stab in the back, that changed the destiny of an entire nation forever. Thanks for watching. If you found this piece of history important, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more stories that should never be forgotten. See you next time.